So 2 tiny habits is when you wake up in the morning, say to yourself, today is going to be a great day. That's actually on the top of my to-do list. Because when I say that to myself, then my unconscious mind finds why today is going to be a great day. And for those of you who have children, if you do this at breakfast, it will set the kids' day up to be positive. And then before you go to bed at night, what I do is I say a prayer, and then I go, what went well today? And I just review the good things about my day, which sets my dreams up to be more positive.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Better Together with me and my crew. I feel like I have no sound, but I'm sure you can hear me. I'm praying you can hear me, right?
I can hear you.
Because I can't hear myself, so maybe there's a little issue with my mic under here. Let me push a few things. But anyhow, so happy to be back with you guys today. We are here to get better, because when you know better, you get better. Our quote of the day: don't believe everything you hear, even in your own mind. Ooh, Dr. Daniel Amen does it again. He is our guest today on the show. He's been here before. Of course, he's been rated one of the most popular psychiatrists in the country. He's got clinics all over, and his work is revolutionary. So we're really excited to talk to him today, because I've been hearing from so many of you that you're feeling depressed. There are so many people who have lost family members to COVID. There are so many people that are just dealing with the mental health challenge of this entire pandemic. So we decided to chat with him today to kind of help us through that. So I'm really excited to have him back.
Me too.
Me too. So we got Kelsey on deck. We got
it's really
Jeff.
interesting. He had mentioned, just hopping in, that like he's seeing a whole new clientele in terms of his patients.
Wow.
Like he was used to a kind of particular type of person, and he's seeing, that suburban mom who never thought she'd even have a conversation about mental health because of this time right now. So I think if you're like the patients that Dr. Amen is seeing, and you're recognizing that it's a much harder time right now than usual, this is the episode for you.
Got it.
I also have to say, everyone in the chat says, Maria, we can hear you.
Yay, because I was just going to ask again. I was a little nervous. We haven't been in the studio in a minute.
Yeah,
so
that's weird. They can hear you.
Good. Thank you guys for joining, of course. And if you haven't already, let's help each other. Please, if you haven't already subscribed to the show, go on over to YouTube or Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you are, and click subscribe. And then we'll continue to help you by bringing in these amazing guests and these amazing thought leaders, and you'll get those little notifications, which is really cool, and you won't miss an episode. A quick shout out for our Patreon. We are trying to migrate from here over to Patreon. We have a lot more latitude there. YouTube doesn't give us the ability to do a lot of things like pulling clips and such. So our Patreon is where we get to do some of our more special stuff. And we're really putting a plan together, and I'll tell you why in a minute, to really do some amazing stuff at Patreon. So jump on in over there at any level. We're doing great giveaways. We're going to be doing more shows over there. And we're going to start doing some like healing demos, really interesting stuff that, that are tougher on the main show. But what I want to do is I want to start exposing you to some of these healing modalities that you have no idea about. And sometimes I have them on the show, and they will speak in terms that make no sense to the rest of us. And so what I want to do is I want to bring them in studio, have them work on one of us, and have them show you how they do it. I think it's a really powerful thing to get to see it and witness it. Okay, so let's get to our interview with Dr. Amen. So excited. The Washington Post called him the most popular psychiatrist in America. He's revolutionized brain research, scanning, and mental health diagnoses through his 8 clinics and millions of followers spread across the U.S. His revolutionary work has garnered praise from movers and shakers like Dr. Phil to Miley Cyrus. And as Jeff said earlier, he's noticed a dramatic shift in his usual clientele during COVID-19 and recognizes that this chapter of our human history is just as risky for mental health as it is for physical health. So, Dr. Amen, thanks so much for joining again.
Hi, Maria.
Good to see you.
Great to see you.
I love
How
the
have you
blue
been?
shirt.
Out of the black. It's like there's enough black with the coronavirus.
Yeah.
So true.
Tell me, since we've just mentioned that your usual clientele has shifted, what has it shifted to? What have you seen that's different?
You know, the incidence of people who are suicidal just skyrocketed. I mean, obviously, as a psychiatrist, it's something I've dealt with my whole career, but never in the numbers that we're seeing now. That isolation often leads to hopelessness, and people don't see a way out. So suicidal behavior, addictions have just skyrocketed. And this, you and I have talked about the ants, the automatic negative thoughts that steal your happiness. They're just running over
Yeah,
people.
explain that for people who may not have seen that episode. It's a really important thing to know.
So whenever you have a thought, your brain releases chemicals. And whenever you have a happy thought, your brain releases chemicals that make you feel good. And whenever you have a sad thought, your brain releases chemicals that make you feel sad. Thoughts are automatic. They just happened. And about 30 years ago, I coined the term ANTS, automatic negative thoughts, the thoughts that come into your mind automatically and ruin your day. And so you need to develop an every other thought your brain releases. You need to develop an internal anteater to kill the ants, to get rid of them so they don't infest your mind. And anyone who's watching the news now has a higher ant population because they're just all over our society.
So what's the raid?
So the raid is, I love that. Whenever you feel sad or mad or nervous or out of control, write down what you're thinking and ask yourself, is it true? If you can absolutely know that that's true, and learning how to discipline your thoughts is just critical to being happy, being purposeful, and not be overwhelmed with negativity. So some people have a bias toward positivity, but so many of my patients have a bias toward negativity, which literally feeds depression and feeds anxiety disorders. Where you bring your attention determines how you feel. And so if I bring my attention to the really wonderful people in my life and the purposeful nature of our work, my grandbabies, I feel happy. But if I bring my attention to the societal unrest, the political divide, the scary things of no toilet paper in the grocery stores, I'm going to feel anxious and afraid. So I can literally train my brain to look for what's right or train my brain to look for what's wrong.
I love that. I think kind of egotistically also, we're all trying to predict, right? Because we want to be right. So I find myself wanting to predict what's going to happen. And I'll be like, oh, I think this is going to happen, or I think that's going to happen. And I'm like, wait, I'm obsessing about stuff that has no, like, there's nothing that I can really predict and nothing I can really control, because you're trying to figure out what's the solution to all of this. How can I get out of this pain? How can I, try to anticipate what's coming so that I'm ready for it? Are you finding that people are kind of in that space, and maybe that's also bringing like darkness?
Well, one of the ants, I have 9 different kinds of ants that I talk about, and dragons, which we might mention. But the ants, there's a fortune-telling ant where you arbitrarily begin to predict things are going to turn out badly, even though you don't have clear evidence for it. And that is the ant that drives panic attacks. every patient I've ever had that have had panic attacks, they're masterful at predicting the worst. And then they just make things worse. So before I knew how to really manage my mind, I would always be in the future with fear. But, that gives you tummy aches, and it gives you headaches, and it gives you relationship problems. And I realized the only people who should really be predicting the worst are contract lawyers. So you want your lawyer to predict the worst for you and make sure the contract's right. But other than that, you really want to start looking at what's right, not at just what is wrong.
Yeah, I know, because before I hit the road, it's been like 6 weeks or so. Yeah. I had gotten to like a darker place because I was thinking about what was coming, and it was just so dark what was coming in my head. And I was so fearful, and, almost like the world was like starting to kind of cave in a little. And I was like, oh my God. And Kevin, my husband, was like, you're going to bust. You need to get out. And luckily, I had been asked to go speak at Tony Robbins' seminar in Florida, and that was my out. I left, and when it was time to come home, my husband said, don't come home. He's like, you need a break. And what's funny is I'm here in the woods with family and, Kelsey and friends, and everything just changed. I've stopped thinking about those things. I've stopped watching the news. I'm totally focused on my, health and my work and whatever. And just the breeze and the trees are changing everything for me. And I know it's because my focus is there and in awe of the nature that I'm seeing and the garden and whatever. And I'm not focusing on that because, as you said, focus equals feeling. And so if we can shift where our focus is going, we can shift what we're going to feel.
So 2 tiny habits that will help you with this every day is when you wake up in the morning, say to yourself, today is going to be a great day. That's actually on the top of my to-do list. Because when I say that to myself, then my unconscious mind finds why today is going to be a great day. And for those of you who have children, if you do this at breakfast, it will set the kids' day up to be positive. And then before you go to bed at night, what I do is I say a prayer, and then I go, what went well today? And I just review the good things about my day, which sets my dreams up to be more positive. Now, the pandemic has not been all joyful for me. I have 8 clinics around the country. We had to close our Manhattan clinic for a couple of weeks because one of my young employees ended up on a ventilator. And then my mom and dad and sister got COVID. And then in early May, I lost my dad.
Oh, no, I'm so sorry.
And the night I lost my dad, and it was a stressful day, but because when I go to bed, I have this routine, it's a habit, right? All of us have habits. Because it was a habit, I went, what went well today? And even though it was a terrible day, I got to be there for my mom. I got hundreds of texts from my friends, from his friends, and there were so many beautiful parts to that day. And so I actually slept like a baby. And you have to develop these things as habits. So when a pandemic comes, it doesn't run over you, right? I mean, we all have pandemics in our lives, whether you get divorced, you get diagnosed with cancer, you lose your job, you have financial problems, right? I mean, this has just magnified everything for us. But the night it happened, for me, it was March 10th, because I got a trip completely canceled. I was going to New York for a new book launch. And I wrote down mental hygiene is just as important as washing your hands. We need to disinfect our thoughts, because the next pandemic is a mental health pandemic. And we already know since March, depression has doubled. So we need to, this is serious stuff, learning how to manage our mind in the middle of an election season where the news literally is not the news anymore. It's clickbait. What is going to get you to tune in to watch? And you have to turn it off, especially around children, right? I mean, read the paper, read on your phone app for like 10 minutes a day, and then you need to leave it alone because it's actually not the news anymore. It's to steal your attention.
Yeah. Wow. I used to have that morning habit. I would do some like yoga poses in the morning, and I'd finish just hugging like the sun and just saying, today's going to be a great day. And every time I did it, it was. Every time I did it. Every time I didn't do it, it was shaky. And I do my gratitude list at night, and I have spoken about this often. You realize that you only, before that, you'll remember the things that were bad in the day. But if you do the gratitude list, you'll be so surprised that there are so many really great things that happen that you actually forgot and just totally took for granted. I say that so that I can reinforce what you just said, but I do want to ask, because so many people have suffered with loss in COVID, whether it was to COVID or another ailment or situation, accident, or some version of death. And the trauma of not being able to be with that person is something I can't even imagine. So I wonder if you could walk people through how this experience was for you. Obviously, you have incredible tools in your pocket. This is, probably different for you. And the reason we do this show every day is to arm people with tools so that when their pandemic hits, they don't get run over, because we all are going to get hit at some point with some crisis, and we need to be ready. Take us through that if you would. I didn't know that information about your dad, and I'm very sorry to hear that, but I think that you could probably help a lot of people who are suffering. And I've seen on my Instagram lots of people who are sad and lost somebody, and it's traumatic right now.
It is. And what I decided to do was go on Facebook for 2 months and just talk about grief and loss and how do you do this. So the Death Dragon. So I have a new book coming out in March called Your Brain is Always Listening. And part of it is about the dragons from the past that breathe fire on your emotional brain. And one of the 13 dragons is the grief and loss dragons. And it's like, it can be from losing someone you love to losing something important like your health or your money, or to even losing an idea like we're going to go back to school in the fall. All of those things can lead to grief. And so how do you deal with that? And the first thing is you tell yourself the truth, that it's sad. When my dad died, my wife, the first week after, I would just sit in my office and cry, listening to his voicemails, because I knew it was important not to block the sadness. And so honor him. And then crazy thing happened. Like 4 days later, I'm at my mom's house going through stacks of paper with her. And then I see a picture of my dad dead in the mortuary before they cremated him. And I'm like, and that picture started to haunt me. Ooh. And I just noticed, I thought about it with irritation and sadness like 5 times that day. And there's a simple technique called havening. It's based on something called alternate hemisphere stimulation. And I don't know if you've heard about EMDR, but it's the same thing. It's a specific psychological treatment for trauma, except what you do is you take your hands, put them on your shoulders, cross your arms, put them on your shoulders, and just stroke down for 30 to 60 seconds. And so I got that image that was terrible in my mind. And as I did that, the image started to change. And I would say things like, my dad's at peace. I'm so grateful I had him. he will always live in me and through his babies and grandbabies. And I have to tell you, after about a minute, I could tell the picture had no power over me. And then it became a picture I actually love, because it's the last image of him. And so whenever you're upset, whenever you just feel that anxiety come, feel it. So too many people block it. They overeat, they're smoking pot, they're drinking alcohol. No, that's just the wrong thing for your brain. Feel it, but then stimulate. Because, when you're holding your left shoulder, it's actually stimulating the right side of your brain. And when you're holding your right shoulder, it's stimulating the left side of your brain. And doing this together calms the fear center in your brain and activates your frontal lobes. And so too often we just don't have the tools to get rid of the anxious, negative thoughts and feelings. And then obviously write down the negative thoughts you have, because with grief often comes guilt. I should have, could have, would have. And those things just aren't helpful. And then what I always say when it comes to grief, fix sleep first, because grief can really mess with sleep. But if you don't sleep, it turns off 700 health promoting genes and you're going to get sick yourself. And throughout this pandemic, despite the losses, I think my stress level's been like on a scale of 1 to 10, a 3, because I just believe that whatever is going to happen, I'm going to be able to manage. And part of it is I've managed the death dragon. And that's the dragon that you almost think of the second to last episode of Game of Thrones, when Daenerys was on the dragon and just wiped out King's Landing. Well, so many people have that image about what's going on. And the fact is, we're all going to die. If you don't deal with the death dragon, your life is going to be much harder. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who is the psychiatrist who was famous for her book on death and dying, wrote that it is the denial of death that is partially responsible for people living empty, meaningless lives. Because when you think you're going to live forever, you don't do the things you know that you must do today. And so I've been wrestling with my death dragon ever since I was in college and took a class on death and dying. But it's just so important. I actually have the 7 things that are good about dying. I just carry them around in my head. I don't have to deal with LA traffic anymore. I don't ever have to see the dentist that, really, I mean, he's got to drill in sharp objects that he puts in your mouth. Like, I'm not okay with that. I don't have to play chicken with the cyclist on the road anymore. It's like, why are you trying to get me to kill you?
That is hilarious. Oh my. Well, I wonder, when you talked about the shoulders being the left and the right side, can you explain that a little bit more? Because that was very interesting to me.
So whenever you touch the left side of your body, it's actually felt in the right side of your brain. And the same thing is true. So for the right side, because your brain has tracks that cross, so which is why if you get a left hemisphere stroke, you're paralyzed on the right side. Well, researchers have found in studying treatments like EMDR that when you stimulate both hemispheres at the same time, that it actually calms down the fear centers in the brain. And it's just so simple, so powerful. I had a child that their parents read them a scary book. Don't read children's scary books. And right, if you look at Grimm's fairy tales, they're grim.
Yeah.
Don't do that before bed unless you hate your children. But the child just got stuck on it. And the mom, he's one of my patients, the mom called me, what do I do? And what we did was this alternate hemisphere stimulation, stimulating his left and right arms like this, and gave him some really simple suggestions. And he went to sleep and the book The book is called The Book That Eats People.
Oh, my Lord.
Do not read that book to children.
Oh, my Lord. I wonder, so I was thinking even for my mom, because her left side is so weak because of the brain tumor on her right side, that would mean to stimulate the left side, she would have to touch her right shoulder and her right side to try to get her left side to work. Right?
Right. And in physical therapy, they have techniques to help her do that.
Oh, that's so interesting.
But if she's anxious, if she's stressed and she can't reach, well, somebody can do that for her.
Yeah. You know, I'm going to just start patting her right side.
Yeah.
And she's like, Maria, what are you doing? Kevin,
But
go
do
home.
it on both sides. And another simple way to do it is just take your hands and do this.
Yeah.
And so, like, if you're in public and you're nervous about something, this might be a little too much for you. But if you do this, people aren't going to have, they're not going to think you're crazy.
What a great tip.
It's stimulating, again, both sides of the brain at once.
And that's what calms the fear center down.
And that calms it down.
Is it because it confuses the fear center so it doesn't have time to think if you're doing this? Both sides are firing, so it's like, we're busy. We don't have time to be afraid.
I think it helps integrate the information. And too often when people have been traumatized, so we also have a wounded dragon, and the wounded dragon is now everywhere. You just have to watch, the president or Governor Cuomo's press conferences. And there's just so much bad news in those press conferences, right? That we're wounded. And if you don't know how to process wounds, trauma, they get stuck in your emotional brain. And this just helps to get them unstuck. And so you actually bring up the trauma. So I focused on that picture. And then as I did this, the energy around the picture went away. And then you plant new pieces of information. He's at peace. He's not suffering. I love him. He'll always be in me. And then it just goes away. It dissipates.
Wow. Were you able to see him in the hospital?
No.
Right?
So he, no. And I'm the one that diagnosed him.
Wow.
And both he, my mom, and my sister had it. But I was on FaceTime with him every day. And they actually came out of the hospital. He was on the front page of the Orange County Register as a COVID success.
Wow.
But he was just tired and never fully recovered. And a month later, he just stopped breathing.
Wow. Yeah, I asked that because I know part of the trauma is you can't be with them. Like, I know my biggest fear is being alone in a hospital because I have a trauma around that, multiple, one from childhood and then one even in adulthood. There's nothing scarier to me than being alone and not being able to communicate what you need. And so my thing is I feel so bad for people who are in there alone. It kills me because I just know how I would feel. And I know that people...
We have to work on that.
Yeah.
We have to work on how you would feel because you're not a child and you are competent and you know how to ask for what you need. So I would actually take that fear because it's driven, as so many of these dragons are driven by what happened when we were children. And I would take that fear and focus on it while you do this or while you do that, and then replace it with, I know how to ask for what I need. I'm competent. It's going to be okay. And then you don't have to live with it because it's often our childhood fears that get stuck in our head. Yeah. And then often helping the 9-year-old or the 5-year-old from your extremely competent adult perspective, like really wrapping your arms around her metaphorically and telling her it's going to be okay. It's one of the breakthrough moments in therapy I have with my patients.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's fair. That's a fair thought and statement. I will be working on that for sure. What happens if I'm on a ventilator, though? I mean, if we're going to get into this, what happens if I'm on a ventilator and I can't explain that I'm in pain and that I need them to morph me up more?
You'll still have your hands because one thing we know that you are expressive.
This is true.
You are assertive, right? Yeah. So as I know you, bright, expressive, assertive, that it's, everybody's got, I don't know if you remember the movie Johnny Got His Gun. It was just the most horrible horror flick about a guy who lost his limbs and he's on a ventilator and he can't communicate. And,
glad I never saw that.
Don't go see it. But we have this idea that we're just going to be powerless.
Yes.
And so rarely is that the case. And you will have good help.
Yeah.
That you've been blessed to be able to know more about medicine than you want to know.
Yep.
And that you're going to have good help. But allowing your mind to go to the dark place over and over actually creates a slide in your brain where it's just so easy to go to the dark place.
Yeah.
So you want to prevent that from happening by going like this again. It's that I'm safe. I'll ask for what I need.
Yes. All will be
it's
well.
It's going to be okay. And then it's not, because we're going to die. So you have to make peace.
Yeah. That part I was cool with. Like before brain surgery, I asked the kinesiologist, I said, can you muzzle test me? I'm not afraid. And he's like, yeah, you're not. That's a problem. Let's work on that. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. I have my crazy fears. I just don't want to be stuck. I remember during surgery, they wanted to take me to an MRI and I was a hot mess. My eyes were going crazy. I couldn't see. I was like a wreck and I was ready to hurl. And I couldn't really communicate, but Kevin could see I was suffering and he's like, you're not taking her. And so Kevin was my communicator. And even when I got through that period and there were moments where I was in so much pain, he was so ahead of it that I didn't even need to say anything. I barely had to talk. He just knew what I needed. So I'm like, what if that happened again and he wasn't there?
He will be.
So that's the trauma to deal with. And you just don't want that stuck in your head.
Yeah.
That what if he wasn't there? And then, you say that once and you don't discipline the thought and then it begins to circle. And then all of a sudden it's gone 800 times and it drives you to feel anxious and afraid. And it's our undisciplined, unquestioned thoughts that drive anxiety, depression, panic, and fear.
Yeah. Well, I think that's such a great example for people to apply to themselves now, because depression is such a problem right now. And I wonder if you have, I guess you could use the ants process for your depression, but what would you say to someone who says right now, I'm so depressed?
Well, I'm horrified in the sense that the pharmaceutical industry is going to win on this. They're going to call their doctor and end up on antidepressants way too quickly without ever doing some of the natural treatments that are very effective. Like omega-3 fatty acids. Everybody should be taking fish oil.
Oh, I've been taking mine.
Good girl.
Yep.
Everyone should optimize their vitamin D level. Low vitamin D is associated with depression and immune system compromise. So you should have your level tested and it should be somewhere around 70. Saffron has actually been found in 21 randomized controlled trials to have the same positive effectiveness as antidepressants. So we actually make something called happy saffron that I just love. Curcumins decrease inflammation, but boost your mood and your memory. Exercise. The scent of lavender, get the highest quality lavender flowers you can, inhale it 4 times a day, has been shown, published in the journal Lancet, to have antidepressant qualities. Walk like you're late, increase the number of fruits and vegetables you eat a day. There's a linear correlation up to 8, showing that increases your level of happiness. Bright light therapy. So if you get a light box, they sell them on Amazon. We make one called Bright Minds Therapy Lamp. Half an hour in the morning helps mood, focus, energy, and sleep. It's been found for people who have seasonal depression to be as effective as antidepressants. So think of head-to-head against antidepressants: exercise, walking like you're late 4 times a week for 45 minutes, fish oil, and then learning not to believe every stupid thing you think, writing down the answer. Now, if you do all of those things and you're still sad and you can't eat and you can't sleep, then talk to your doctor about medicine. After, of course, he checks your thyroid, your vitamin D level, because those can also be involved in depression. But it's not the first thing to do. And I'm worried people go, oh, depression's common. Please give me something so I'm not depressed. And I'm not opposed to antidepressants, but once you start them, they're sort of hard to stop.
Yeah. I have found, we've tried it with my mom, and I have found the opposite. I've found her to become more depressed, more lethargic. I've not found them to be useful. And the second we take her off of it, things are different. I'm going to implement your list of natural depression remedies. I do some of them, like I do the lavender at night. I'm inhaling lavender on my wrists. I put it on my pillows. It's one of my like sleep rituals. And I always walk like I'm late and such. But I think this will be really great tips that we can put online for everybody to focus on. Those are really great tips. I'd love to know your thoughts on homeschooling right now and the mental health of children around homeschooling, because I know this is a very difficult time as parents are having to decide what they're going to do with their kids, and wrapping their heads around whether they should or they shouldn't. And I know you have some positive effects of homeschooling, so I'd like to get into a little of that before we go.
So I've actually been a huge fan of homeschooling for 30 years. I'm also a child psychiatrist. And
Really?
who do you want to influence your children the most? Is it their friends? Is it their teachers? Or is it you? And with homeschooling, parents just have a lot more bonding. It's been the best thing about this pandemic is 8 out of 10 families say they are closer together. It's clearly true in my family. My youngest has just turned 17, but we also have my 10-year-old and 15-year-old nieces living with us. The extra time together has been historically special. And I like homeschooling for a couple of reasons. One, children get at least an extra hour of sleep because they don't have to get up early and get the bus or get ready. And children who just get 1 less hour of sleep at night than their peers have a higher incidence of depression and suicide.
Wow.
So I like that a lot. And I like the parental influence. Now, it's hard if parents have to work. It's hard socially. You really have to sort of figure out, how am I going to get them more social interaction? But from a bonding and influence perspective, it just gives children a huge benefit. And I'm a fan this year of homeschooling because I know schools don't have it together yet. We're going back, we're not going back. This always plants anxiety in the children's heads. So if you can homeschool, I'm a big fan of that from a developmental standpoint. I think the pandemic is just not going away. I think we're going to probably be into this until next fall. And so the more routine, the more consistency you can get. And if you really want to have happy, healthy children, you have to manage your own mental health. Children are like violins. They play the stress of their parents. Turn off the news. They don't need to listen to that. But you need to take time to breathe, to kill your own ants, to take care of yourself. Otherwise, your ants will jump on them and they'll be more anxious than they need to be.
Wow. Oh, my. Damn, this is my favorite episode ever.
I know. I have so many notes.
I want you to tell us about your new book, Your Brain is Always Listening. I know dragons is a part of that new book, but what else can we expect from this new book?
Well, I talk about the influences that change your brain in both a positive way and a negative way. And section 1 is about the dragons from the past that are still breathing fire on your emotional brains. My favorite dragon is called the ancestral dragon, where the issues are, in fact, not yours. They belong to your mother, to your grandmother. When my grandfather was 19, his brother was killed in a horrific train accident. And my grandfather never drove a car. And he gifted. So he had that trauma before he made my dad. And so that anxiety got transmitted down 3 generations. When I was a little boy, I used to bite my nails often until they bled, and you have no idea why. And I think it's actually not my anxiety. It's what I got from my grandfather. And so if you're suffering for something and you don't really know why, it may not be yours. And so learning about the ancestral dragon has been so helpful for many of my patients.
How do you instruct people to look into that? Do you explain that in the book?
I do. And part of it is really taking a deep dive into your own family history. And before my dad died, we just had great conversations. I want to know about what you were like as a little boy. And I learned so many, some disturbing things, but some really great things. Because yes, you can inherit trauma, but you also inherit resilience. And my dad was a maverick, which in my profession I am too. So I got to inherit that as well. In the book, I also talk about the scheming dragons, which is our society damaging us, right? There's the, fast food dragons that are like, oh, you see these commercials all the time, whether it's McDonald's or Taco Bell or whatever, for these incredibly delicious meals that are 8,000 calories and will definitely kill you early. But those messages coming into our head, your brain's listening to that. And one of my favorite parts of the book is I have a new 12-step program for addicts. The 12-step program was actually developed in the 30s, and that has not one thing to do with the brain. And so I decided, all right, if you're going to break free of addictions, you have to know how to fall in love with your brain and take care of it so you can deal with the craving dragon. So it's a really fun book, very practical.
Is there a dragon on the cover?
There is a dragon.
Yes! I love it. Man, well, we have enough content in there for a whole other episode. But for now, this was, jam-packed with so much useful information and so many kind of aha moments that I'm grateful that we got to have you again. And so thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Well, it's always great to see you. I am grateful for you and for the wonderful work you do to help people.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, we will see you soon, Dr. Amen. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Have a great one. Okay, really, guys?
You guys.
How do we get better episodes every day?
I don't know. I'm like, I give myself enough space to keep like just a little chunk of notes, write down my ahas. I had to flip to the back. I was flipping to like, my Lord. That was amazing.
Atlanta, damn.
That was
like boom,
really amazing.
Boom, boom, aha
I know.
moment. No,
I know.
Tip, aha moment. Tip, aha moment.
And easy to apply. That's what I loved about him.
Yeah, hi, I'm doing that all the time.
How easy. Vitamin D, omega-3, so easy.
Yeah, I have his omega-3s. I forgot I've been taking them. And so I have his Focus and Energy pills. I have his Bright Minds powder, and I have his omega-3.
So good.
And the other day I was like, oh, shit, I need to take this omega-3. So anyhow, Jeff, sorry,
Yes,
I know
Jeff.
you were trying to jump in.
No. I'm agreeing with everything you're saying, first of all. And second of all, I just like him. I mean, there's
me
a
too.
demeanor about Dr. Amen that's so warm. And like, of course, you'd want him to be your mental health expert, right? Like, I mean, this is the highest, most complimentary way, but he does remind you of like your really kind, warm grandfather that's going to sort of help you through this. And I just, so much thanks for him for coming back on. And to his credit and his team's credit, he was really excited to come back on as well. So a good ally for the show.
Yeah, I feel like another episode for him that would be amazing is to go through all those dragons and then really detail kind of how you conquer them, right? Or how you tame them so that they work for you, because I feel like your dragons can work for you.
Absolutely.
Right? It's like your traumas, the things that you think were the worst things that happened could be the best things, because, you know, like with every failure, if you learn something, then it wasn't a failure. Like there are ways to kind of spin all of these things to your advantage. And so I would love to do that interview again at some point. Well, I hope that was helpful to you guys. I hope that you enjoyed it. Of course, if you want to keep up with Dr. Amen, you can go to his website, amenclinics.com. We'll put that in the summary. Of course, like we said, if you would help us out by subscribing. And by the way, thank you for all the beautiful comments on Apple Podcasts and YouTube and everywhere. We're seeing them. We're so grateful. We're trying to get to 1,000 comments on iTunes, on Apple Podcasts. Sorry, iTunes was like so 2019 on Apple Podcasts. So if you could help us out and go over there and tell us what you think, that would be great. If you love an episode like this, share it with friends on social media so that they can see it and their friends can see it, and we can bring in more people to help get them better and give them this incredible information. And so, yeah, if you liked today's episode, by the way, check out episode, we just started numbering them. Thank you, Kels.
Hey now.
Check out episode number 33. It was our original episode with Dr. Amen. If you want to reach us, you can visit mariamenounos.com. In the meantime, follow Dr. Amen at Doc Amen, at Jeffrey Crane Graham, at Kelsmeyer22, at Maria Menounos. And remember, be nice people, make good choices, and be present.